It came in a white envelope sealed with gold foil. No name, no return address, just a shimmer like it wanted to be touched. I wasn't supposed to see it. God knows I wasn't meant to open it. But I did, and the moment I saw the handwriting on the card inside, my hands stopped working. My chest. It felt like glass being stepped on. It was hers. Neat, delicate curves with those same exaggerated loops on the Y's. I'd memorized her handwriting when I was 15, watching her sign my father's will as a witness. And now here it was again, inviting anyone to a celebration I wasn't even warned about. I didn't need to read the rest. My stomach already knew what my eyes refused to. I sat down right there, on the floor in the hallway. One shoe on, my coat still half off. The sunlight from the window hit the gold print like it was trying to make a joke out of me. You are cordially invited to celebrate the wedding of... And then his name. His full name printed beside hers, like they belonged together. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stared at it. That's the thing no one tells you about heartbreak. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's just this dull pressure behind your ribs, like your body's waiting for the grief to catch up. I texted him. Nothing dramatic. Just, "Did you forget to mention something?" He replied 2 hours later. "I was going to tell you." That was it. Not sorry. Not even a lie good enough to hate. I took the card and put it on the kitchen counter, right next to the coffee machine he left here when he moved out for space. He said he just needed time. I gave him 3 months. I didn't date. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even throw away his toothbrush. Turns out he was just giving her time to move in. Do you know what it feels like to be erased from your own story? I walked through my apartment like it wasn't mine. Everything felt fake. The photos, the throw pillows, the books he gave me to help me sleep. And that's when it hit me, he never gave me peace. He just gave me silence. Polite, tidy silence that looked like love but was really just avoidance wrapped in charm. I opened the card again. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see if he'd written a note on the back. Some proof that he remembered I existed. But it was blank. Like me, that night, I didn't sleep. I lay there, with my eyes open, replaying every moment I thought was real. His laugh when I burned the pasta. The way he'd pull me back into bed on rainy mornings. The promises. God, the promises. I'd never do what he did to you. But he did. He did it with a smile. The next morning, I called my sister. Told her I needed a break. She offered her beach house. I said no. What I needed wasn't sand and ocean. It was distance from the version of me that believed him. So I drove, aimlessly, through old streets, past our old coffee shop, through the tunnel he once called our escape route. And then, I found myself parked in front of a building I hadn't visited in years, my parents' lawyer's office. It started like a whisper in my brain, a thought I wasn't ready to have. The estate. When my father died, he left it to me, but I never touched it. Let it sit there, aging in silence like grief itself. He used to say, "One day when you're ready, it's yours." I wasn't ready back then, but I was now. I walked inside, heels clicking too loudly on the polished floor, heart pounding like I was planning a crime. And maybe I was. The kind that doesn't involve blood but still leaves a body behind. The receptionist blinked up at me. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but I think I'm ready to sell a house." And just like that, something in me started breathing again. I didn't call him, didn't send a warning. Let him plan his golden wedding on land he didn't even own. Let her decorate my grandmother's rose garden like it was hers to claim. Let them toast in the ballroom while I signed it all away to someone else. He took her to my family's estate. So I sold it while they slept. Let them wake up and find the locks changed. Let them realize the fairy tale was written by the wrong woman, because here's the truth no one likes to admit. When they erase you, you write the ending. And mine hasn't even started yet. The first photo I saw was of the roses. They'd bloomed early this year, soft pink, just like my mother loved them. But it wasn't the flowers that knocked the air out of me. It was the white folding chairs lined up neatly between them, dozens of them, facing an arch I didn't recognize, draped in silk and wild vines that had no business being there. Her caption said, "Our forever starts here." I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the screen, numb, my thumb frozen above the heart icon I'd never press. He brought her to the house I was raised in, the garden my mother spent a lifetime pruning, weeding, whispering to, where we buried her ashes under the second rose bush from the left, the same spot they were using as an aisle now. I felt cold, even though the sun was pouring through my window. My coffee had gone bitter in my hands, but I couldn't put it down. It was like my body was still catching up to what my soul already knew. He didn't just move on. He rewrote the past, erased me. When we were together, I took him there once. Only once. He said it smelled like heaven. Said we'd get married there, one day under the lilac tree by the old sundial. I remember laughing, thinking it was too soon to talk like that. But secretly, I'd already started picturing the dress. Now she was the one in white. I clicked through the rest of the photos. She was twirling under the arch. He was holding her waist like it was second nature. His parents stood in the background, smiling like nothing was wrong. Like I'd never existed. The worst part? I couldn't even call it a betrayal anymore. It felt like a burial, a slow, quiet one where the body's still breathing. I called my aunt. She's the one who's been caretaking the estate since Mom passed. She answered on the third ring, chipper as always. "Sweetheart," she said. "Been meaning to call you. Is there a wedding happening at the house?" Silence. Then a nervous laugh. "Oh, you saw the photos. You didn't think I should know?" "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "He said you two weren't talking. That he had your blessing." I almost dropped the phone. "He said what?" "That it was your idea. That you wanted him to have it. He said you'd moved on." Moved on? I hadn't even moved out of our apartment until 3 weeks ago. I still had his name on packages, still caught myself reaching for his side of the bed in my sleep. And he stood in my mother's garden, my mother's grave, pretending I'd handed him the keys with a smile. "I have to go," I said quietly, and hung up before she could say more. I didn't cry. I got in my car. I didn't even know where I was going at first. I just drove. My hands shook on the steering wheel the way they used to when I took Mom to chemo. That same sick, slow panic, like something was breaking that couldn't be put back. I parked just outside the gates. The iron ones he once said looked like a fairy tale entrance. They were wide open now. I walked in slowly, one step at a time, like I was walking into someone else's memory. There were fresh petals scattered across the stone path. Lavender, white rose, some eucalyptus tucked into the corners. I remembered the scent. Not from my mother's garden, but from the Pinterest board I made for our wedding. The one he used to scroll through late at night, pretending he wasn't interested. They copied it, everything. The layout, the chairs, even the playlist humming low in the background, still playing from a speaker someone forgot to turn off. I walked to the rose bush and stood in front of it. The one where I'd whispered goodbye to my mother, where I'd buried the note with her wedding ring wrapped inside, and there, right in the center of the aisle, was a champagne cork. He toasted their love 3 feet from where I buried my grief. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of the fountain and listened to the water. The same fountain I once fell into as a kid chasing butterflies. The same one he laughed at when I told the story. The same one he photographed last year and posted with the caption, "Home feels like this." I guess it did. Until it didn't belong to me anymore. I stayed there a long time. Watched the breeze move through the trees. Watched the sun hit the petals just right. And I realized something that made my chest ache with clarity. He hadn't just taken the house. He took her, my mother. Her garden. Her memory. Her peace. He gave it to someone else. And I let him. But not anymore. Because something about standing there, alone, in the silence of what was once mine, didn't break me. It woke me up. I stood, brushed the dirt off my skirt, picked up the cork, and I smiled just a little, because weddings are temporary. But land can be sold. The champagne was still cold when I found out. Not metaphorically, not in some poetic way. It was literally cold, still sweating in the glass. Sitting on the silver tray I'd carried into the drawing room out of habit. I wasn't supposed to be there. I hadn't planned to come back at all. But something told me, something deep and quiet, that, if I didn't see it with my own eyes, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if it was real. So I came, through the back gate, through the servants' entrance. like I was a stranger in the house my father built. Their voices carried before I even stepped inside. Not laughter, not whispers. Vows. Soft. Sweet. Practiced. Hers first. Then his. Slow, clear, like he was reciting a promise he'd once made to someone else. And meant it. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, in the dark corner of the hallway, my hand still wrapped around the chilled stem of the glass, watching the light spill from the parlor onto the marble floors. The same floors I used to slide across in socks as a kid, the same chandelier above that I helped my mother decorate every Christmas. That room was never supposed to hold a wedding, especially not one I wasn't invited to. He didn't see me, neither did she. They were too caught up in their perfect moment, framed by the French doors and ivy-covered walls, surrounded by people who once clapped for us. And there, between them, was the bouquet, white roses and sprigs of lavender. My bouquet. I designed it 2 years ago. Showed him the mock-up from my Pinterest board the night we first talked about getting married. He said it looked like something from a dream. Now it was her dream. His mother smiled like this was always the plan. His sister wiped away tears. The officiant spoke the final words, and I swear my heartbeat timed itself to every syllable. "You may kiss the bride." I turned away before their lips met. My hand trembled, champagne spilling over the rim. I walked back down the hallway slow, measured steps, my heels clicking against the stone, like they were announcing my heartbreak out loud. I reached the butler's pantry and sat down on the bench beside the wine fridge. Same place I used to hide during dinner parties, sneaking sweets my mother said would ruin my appetite. Now the only thing ruined was me. I took a sip. It didn't taste like celebration, it tasted like the end. I wasn't angry yet. I was just hollow, like the part of me that should have screamed was still stuck back in that hallway watching him give her everything he'd promised me. I scrolled through my phone, not even knowing what I was looking for. Old texts, photos, proof that I hadn't imagined all of it, that he did once love me. There it was, a picture from this same room. I was in his arms, laughing. He had flour on his shirt from the cake we'd tried to bake together and ruined. The caption said, "Some messes are worth it." I closed the photo. Apparently not this one. The door creaked. I froze. Footsteps. They weren't loud. Careful, deliberate, like someone was slipping away from the party they shouldn't be leaving. And then I heard her laugh. Not fake. Not cruel. Just unaware. I didn't move. I didn't want her to see me. I didn't want to explain who I was, or worse, who I used to be. But she never came in. She passed by the door and paused in the hallway. "I love it here," she whispered, not to anyone, just to herself. Then she walked on, and I just sat there, holding a glass of someone else's celebration, with mascara smudged under my eyes and a stomach full of fire and ice. A voice inside me said, "Get up, go." But another voice, the one that still sounded like the girl who used to believe in happy endings, said, "Wait, wait, for him to look for me." He wouldn't, because he knew I might show up. That I'd feel the pull of this house like a wound that never healed, and he didn't care. Or worse, he hoped I would, just to see if I could take it. I stood slowly, set the glass down, and looked at myself in the mirror on the pantry door. I looked tired, not from age, from disappointment, from carrying love that was never meant to stay. And in that silence, I heard it cheers, applause, music starting, their first dance. I walked to the kitchen, found the back door, and let myself out. The sky was pink with sunset. The air smelled like lilacs and lies. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because this wasn't the end. It was just the moment before the fire starts. The sheets were still warm when I opened the door, not from sunlight, from skin. Their laughter was faint, tangled in the hallway behind me. But the bed they'd used, my bed, the one with the cracked headboard from when I kicked it in a tantrum at 12, the one my mother used to tuck me into after every heartbreak, every schoolgirl sob session, every night I thought the world was too big and I was too small to matter. Now it smelled like him, and someone else. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just walked in, sat on the edge, and tried to remember what it felt like to be safe in this room. The pink paint was still peeling at the corners. My childhood books still lived on the shelf like forgotten witnesses. I even saw the tiny scratch I made on the windowsill the night I promised myself I'd never let anyone ruin me again. Funny how we break promises to ourselves before anyone else does. I heard her voice in the hallway light, careless, like she had no idea what she'd just done. Or maybe she did. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe that's why she smiled at me in the garden earlier, all innocence and white lace, while I stood there, like a ghost at my own funeral. I wasn't supposed to come in here. I was supposed to stay for one polite glass of wine, keep my chin up, pretend I hadn't just sold the house to strangers who would gut it and paint over every memory. But I had to see it. I had to know if it still felt like mine. It didn't. The sheets were different. So were the curtains. But the ache, the way my chest pulled tight in this room that was exactly the same. I curled up on the edge of the mattress, facing the wall, knees drawn to my chest like I was 12 again, and I screamed, not loud, not with sound. I screamed inside, quiet and endless and sharp, the kind of scream only grief knows how to make. I thought about how he used to trace circles on my back when I couldn't sleep, how he told me once that I was the only place that ever felt like home, how I let those words stitch themselves into my skin like a second layer of belief. And now he'd taken that same comfort, those same hands, those same sighs, and given them to someone else in the same bed where I used to cry over him, over my father, over every version of love that left me. I sat up slowly, my hair sticking to my cheek, my hands trembling. There was a necklace on the nightstand, delicate gold, definitely not mine. I picked it up, tiny initials on the charm, hers. I set it back down carefully, like if I broke it, I'd be the one in the wrong. And isn't that the curse? When you're the one who's been betrayed but somehow still feel like the intruder. I stood and looked around the room, tried to find something that was mine. A photo, a stuffed animal, anything that hadn't been replaced. But everything felt like a memory someone had edited without asking me. I opened the closet. It still smelled like old perfume and dust. And there, in the back corner, was the box. A shoebox I'd hidden when I was 16, full of letters I never sent, drawings I was too shy to show anyone, and the silver bracelet my mother gave me the week before she died. I sat on the floor and opened it. The letters were yellowed, folded and refolded from all the nights I read them with a flashlight under the covers. One of them still had a lipstick kiss on the envelope. I don't even remember whose name I'd written on it. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it was mine. This hurt was mine. This space, this past mine. He could give her the house, he could give her the bed, but he couldn't give her my roots. Because I bled in this room, I grew here. I grieved here. I became a woman here bit by bit, heartbreak by heartbreak. She may have his attention now, but I had everything that made him who he was. I stood up and put the box under my arm. That's all I needed. Not revenge, not rage, just removal. Let them think they won. Let them play house in a place I turned into a home, because I'm not broken. Not anymore. But he will be when he realizes what I took with me. He said they bought it together. He stood there, with her, smiling in that easy, polished way he always did when he was lying. Told the guests how they'd fallen in love with the estate, how it was meant to be theirs. I just stood at the edge of the garden, holding a glass of champagne I didn't want, watching them pose in front of the house I grew up in. I didn't say anything that day. I didn't cause a scene. I just smiled through clenched teeth and made small talk with people who didn't know they were walking through my memories like tourists. But inside, I was burning. A week later, I sat across from the lawyer my father used before he passed. His office still smelled like mahogany and legal ink, and the chair squeaked when I shifted, like it, too, was nervous to say what needed to be said. He adjusted his glasses, flipped through a file, then paused, and said one line that cracked the floor beneath me. Technically, the deed is still in your name. I blinked. What? He looked up, calm, measured, like he hadn't just handed me the match I didn't know I'd been holding. The house was never formally transferred. He assumed the paperwork went through, but it didn't. You're still the legal owner. I didn't speak for a long moment. I just stared at the edges of the folder like they might slice me open. All this time, he'd played host in a house that wasn't his. Held parties. Slept with her in my mother's sheets. Held parties. Slept with her in my mother's sheets. Held parties. An engagement video under my father's willow tree. And he didn't even own it. I swallowed. My voice came out low. So if I wanted to, I could sell it. The lawyer gave a cautious smile. You could do a lot of things. I left the office in silence. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I needed the silence to hear myself think for the first time in months. I sat in my car outside and stared at the dashboard. My fingers were numb. I could feel the weight of what I'd just been handed, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to carry it. Because it wasn't just about the house. It was about everything he took. The way he made me feel small when I doubted him. The way he told me I was too emotional when I asked if something was going on with her. The way he promised we'd move into the estate together, that we'd raise kids there, someday. Then broke that promise with a smirk and a wedding invitation I never received. I pressed my palm to my chest. The ache was still there, but it wasn't grief anymore. It was focus. Later that evening, I walked through the house again alone. The spare key was still hidden in the same loose stone on the back porch. He hadn't even bothered to change it. Typical. Everything looked curated, cold, staged for people who cared more about appearances than memories. But I saw through it all. The paint over my growth marks in the hallway, the new chandelier that hung where my mother's wedding portrait used to be, the kitchen table, different chairs but the same corners I once sat at, eating cereal before school, waiting for my dad to finish reading the paper, and on the counter, their wedding photo in a silver frame, her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist. I stared at it until my hand stopped shaking. Then I picked it up, turned it face down, and walked outside. The garden was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind felt like it was waiting to see what I'd do next. I sat on the stone bench and thought about all the ways I could blow this up. Publicly, legally, dramatically. But the truth, I didn't want revenge. I wanted release. He made a show of pretending to move on, but I could actually end it. On paper, in real life, with one pen stroke. And so, I made a decision. The next morning, I met with a real estate agent. Told her I wanted the property listed quickly, quietly, and in full. She asked if I was sure. I nodded, because this wasn't just a house anymore. It was a stage for a lie I never agreed to. Let them wake up to a notice on the door. Let them realize the home they built their future on had always belonged to someone else. To me. And now, it was going to belong to no one, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is take back the story before they get to rewrite the ending. The papers were still warm from the printer when I signed them. Upstairs, they were asleep in the bed that used to be mine, in the house that used to be mine, in the life that was mine before he decided she was softer, sweeter, easier to lie to. I didn't need revenge. I needed release, so I took the pen in my hand, calm, deliberate, and I wrote the end of their fairy tale with one quiet signature. The ink barely dried before I felt it, the weight lifting off my ribs like a slow exhale. Not peace, not yet, but space. And after everything he took, space felt like power. The estate was his dream, the one he only chased because it used to be mine. He used to say, "It's the kind of place where legacy starts." And I believed him, until I watched him build a new legacy with her, using my memories as the foundation. I sat at the kitchen table for a while after I signed, just staring out at the garden, watching the early morning mist curl between the hedges. The roses were blooming, stubborn as ever. They didn't care who loved who, they just bloomed anyway. I could hear them upstairs, the faint creak of floorboards, a soft laugh through a half-closed door, and I imagined her stretching in my sheets, in my room, the sun touching my walls, unaware that everything around her had just been sold out from under her. I'd called the real estate agent the day before, told her I wanted no signs, no drama, no noise, Just a clean sale, quick, quiet, final. She asked why. I said, because he thinks he won. She didn't ask another question. The buyer, a developer, young, hungry, no nostalgia, he offered over asking, said he wanted to turn the property into an event space. Modern luxury meets old soul, he said. Perfect. Let them toast anniversaries in a place she thought was hers. Let strangers dance in the halls where I used to cry. Let 1,000 new stories overwrite mine. I'm done being the footnote. At 6:42 a.m., I left the signed documents on the counter. I didn't make noise, didn't slam a door. I just picked up my coat, slipped on my shoes, and walked out the same way I walked in, unseen. But before I did, I paused at the bottom of the staircase. I looked up toward the second floor, where his shirt from the night before hung on the banister. Wrinkled. Familiar. The same one he wore the first time he told me he loved me. And I said it back like it was scripture. God. I was such a believer back then. I stepped outside before I could feel too much. The air hit my skin like truth. Eyes sharp. Cold. Clean. I got in my car, turned the key, and drove without looking in the rear view. But my phone buzzed at the red light 3 blocks away. His name. A missed call. Then a text. Where are you? The gate code's not working. I didn't reply. Shoo. Not because I was being cruel, but because some endings don't deserve a reply. They deserve silence. They deserve a sold sign in the yard. They deserve a woman who walks away with her head held high and the deed in her name. I pulled over by the lake, let the sun touch my face, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a woman abandoned. I felt like a woman returned, to herself, to her power, to her own damn story, because they slept through the moment their world changed, and I signed my freedom right under their roof. One signature, one sale, one hell of a morning after. And I haven't even told them who bought it yet. Shoo. I knew they'd still be in their pajamas. I knew she liked to eat late, something about intermittent fasting and mimosa mornings. And he never came downstairs until she poured the second glass. Shoo, when the doorbell rang at 8:07 a.m. and the dog started barking, I already knew what was about to unfold. I'd timed it, down to the minute. The buyers didn't knock twice. They let themselves in confident, eager, holding coffee cups and a folder thick with keys, documents, and plans. The woman wore heels. The man carried a measuring tape. They looked like a renovation show, about to shoot a pilot. Fresh, polished, ready to gut the past and install marble countertops. Their laughter echoed through the hallway until they stepped into the dining room and saw them. He was mid-chew. Scrambled eggs. Her fork hovered over avocado toast, trembling slightly. A carafe of fresh orange juice stood in the center of the table, like it still had a place in the future. Everyone froze. She dropped her mimosa. It shattered on the hardwood. He stood up too fast, knocking over his chair. His eyes darted to the open front door, then to the couple standing inside it. What the hell? He snapped. The man smiled calmly. We were told the house would be vacated by this morning. He blinked. What are you talking about? This is my house. The woman pulled out the contract and unfolded it slowly. Not anymore, she said. We closed 2 days ago. Title's clear. Deeds signed. It's ours. I watched from across the street. I wasn't hiding, just waiting, holding a takeaway coffee and a heart that had finally stopped trembling. His voice rose. Something about lawyers, something about mistakes. She was crying now, barefoot on the tile, mouthing, I don't understand, as if understanding would change a damn thing. I wonder if they remembered what day it was. The day they brought their wedding photographer to shoot in front of the rose garden I helped plant, the same garden where my mother's ashes are buried under the second bush from the left, the same one they posed in like they owned history. He never checked the paperwork. Never followed through with the title transfer. He just assumed I'd given up. That I'd disappear, quietly, like a woman is supposed to. But women like me, we burn quiet. We burn soft and steady, until one day you look around and everything you thought was yours is gone. She turned to him, her voice breaking. Did you know about this? Tell me you didn't know, tell me you didn't lie again. And in that moment, I didn't feel pity. Not for her, not for him, just something final, like I was watching the last page of a chapter that had drained me for years. I crossed the street, walked up the drive. He saw me first. His face, God, I wish I could bottle that. Look, the disbelief, the panic, the dawning horror of someone who just realized he'd played himself. Did you do this? He asked, voice low, like saying it softer would make it less real. I didn't answer. I looked at her instead, her mascara smudged, her hands shaking. She whispered, "Why?" And I said the only truth that mattered, because you slept in a house you never owned. The new owners thanked me, handed me an envelope. They didn't ask questions, they didn't need to. Some stories are written in posture, in silence, in the way a woman doesn't flinch when she walks through fire. He tried to follow me when I turned to leave. Wait, he said, like I hadn't already waited enough, but I didn't stop. I didn't turn back, because I wasn't leaving my home. I was walking away from his. He stood in the middle of the empty foyer like he was the one who'd been robbed. His voice cracked when he said it, like the truth had punched the breath out of his lungs. You sold my legacy? I didn't blink, didn't move, just met his eyes with the same silence he once gave me the night he came home smelling like a perfume I never wore. No, I said. I took back mine, and that was it. That was the moment he stopped breathing through charm. His mouth opened like he had something clever to say, some polished line, some sugar-coated excuse, but nothing came out. Just air, cold, stale air, and a face full of disbelief. I wanted to feel triumphant. I really did, but all I felt was stillness, the kind that only comes after you've cried every tear you had, after you've buried love in its favorite place and walked away without turning around. He looked around, confused, like the walls were supposed to protect him, like the floorboards would somehow remember him and pull me back. They were going to put our names on the gate, he said. This was going to be our home. I almost laughed. Was it before or after you erased mine from the deed? His jaw twitched. He hated when I was calm. Always said I made pain look too tidy. But I wasn't tidy. I was finished. You don't understand, he tried. This house, it's everything my family's ever had. Your family didn't build this. I cut in. Mine did. My father, my mother, me, with late nights and funeral costs and silent meals in that dining room after she passed. We kept this place standing when the roof leaked and the garden died. He flinched. I kept going. You came after the grief, after the mess, after the hard parts were already done. You came for the story, not the sacrifice. His lips moved, but nothing came out. Like his mouth didn't know how to form an apology that would matter. I stepped toward the window, watching the movers carry out the last of the furniture. The house echoed, now empty but not hollow. There was a difference. Hollow was what I'd felt the night I found the receipt for the ring in his coat pocket. 3 weeks after he told me he needed space. The ring wasn't for me. You used to say this. House felt like forever, I whispered. He swallowed. It did. No, I said. It felt like mine. You just borrowed it. He looked like he wanted to scream, or cry, or beg, maybe all three, but I wasn't here for his breakdown. I was here for mine, the good kind, the kind where the version of you that needed him finally crumbles, and something stronger steps forward in her place. You should have told me, he said, softer now. You should have warned me. I did, I said. The day you chose her and assumed I'd stay quiet. He turned to the front door as if it might save him, as if the outside world could explain how the ground had shifted beneath him while he slept next to someone else in my bed. The woman he left me for was in the car. She hadn't come in. Maybe she knew better. Or maybe she just knew this wasn't her story to be in. Where will you go? He asked, suddenly, like it mattered. I smiled without smiling. Anywhere, everywhere. He looked back at the walls again, like they might echo with my voice one last time, but they wouldn't. They'd already let me go. I walked past him, calm, slow, my heels clicking against the same floor we used to dance on at midnight when the power went out. At the door, I paused. "You know what the sad part is?" I said. "You thought this house made you powerful." He didn't answer. I stepped outside and let the silence tell him everything I didn't have to say. She posted a photo of her engagement ring, and I recognized it before I saw her face. It was the same diamond I picked out in Paris 3 years ago. I held it up to the light in that tiny antique shop near the scene, smiled and told him, "This feels like us, imperfect but real." He laughed, said he couldn't afford it. I bought it anyway, put it in his name, and now she's wearing it like she earned it. Her caption said, "He treats me like a queen. Sweetheart. He's spending my crown." People saw him and assumed he was the success. The suit, the car, the confidence. What they didn't see was the woman behind it, the woman who poured herself into late nights, early mornings, silent dinners, and strategic smiles, who proofread his pitches, who connected him to my father's lawyer, who built the scaffolding he now stands on. She thought he was rich. She didn't know I was the empire. I built the fortune he spent brick by brick, contract by contract, lie by beautiful lie I chose to believe because I loved him more than I loved being right. I saw her for the first time at the gala. She wore red. Of course she did. Red screams, "Look at me even when you don't know what you're looking at." I wore black, not because I wanted to fade into the background, but because I knew I didn't have to shout to be remembered. They walked in together. Her heels clicked too fast. His hand rested low on her back, the way it used to rest on mine when he wanted to pretend we were something more than a transaction. She smiled like she had won something, and for a second, I almost let myself feel replaced, until she leaned in and said, "You must be the ex." Not his ex, just the ex. That's when I smiled back. "No," I said. "I'm the reason he could afford the ring." She blinked. He choked on his drink, and I walked away, because the thing no one tells you is, there's a different kind of power in silence. In knowing. In watching someone build a castle on a cliff you already evacuated. She married the aftering, the story I had already survived, and the house they now call home. It was once my investment property, bought in my name, paid off with my sleepless nights and frozen bank accounts and the startup I mortgaged my 20s for. He had the face for business. I had the fire, and he used it like it was his, until he decided he'd outgrown the woman who made him. I let it go quietly at first. Let him have his shiny narrative. Let him pose with her on yachts I helped finance. Let him sip champagne on terraces I designed the contracts for. But then she came for me. Not directly, just in whispers. She was too controlling. She didn't support him. She didn't believe in him. Oh, honey. I believed in him so much. I bet my name on him. I just didn't realize he was gambling with someone else's chips. So when I sold the stocks, when I pulled the licensing, when I rewrote the trust, success, he didn't see it coming, because he forgot who built the empire he walks through like he earned it. And I don't mean metaphorically, I mean the actual name on the paperwork. I mean the actual name on the paperwork. I mean the actual signature on the board resolution. The actual final say on whether that estate in Tuscany stays in his portfolio. I said no, just once. And the dominoes started falling. I didn't do it to hurt him. I did it to free myself. Because I was done letting someone else tell my story. Done watching the girl in red drink my wine in my dress on my balcony while pretending she was the beginning of something. When really, she was just the credits rolling on a film I already lived through. I don't hate her. She was just reading the second act like it's the first. And him. He stood in my office last week, palms sweating, eyes begging. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. I didn't yell, didn't cry, just leaned back in the chair he once said. "I looked too powerful in," and said, "Because you thought I was the background to your success." He said nothing. And then, so soft it was almost a whisper, he asked, "Do you miss?" I looked him in the eye, and I lied. No, because I don't miss him. I miss who I was before him. But she is back now, and she is not giving anything away for free. They were eating croissants in the sunroom when the knock came. She was laughing. I remember that, clearly, that glassy kind of laugh women use when they think they've finally won. The estate agent didn't knock twice. He walked in through the open French doors, holding the envelope with both hands like it might burn through the paper. Polite smile, perfect posture, and a tone just professional enough to sting. "Mr. Hale? Miss Cartwright? I have something for you." They looked up confused, but not yet afraid. He stood. She stayed seated, brushing a crumb from her lap, still unaware that the ground was shifting under her heels. "What is this?" he asked, already annoyed. The agent didn't flinch. "Official notice. The property has been sold. Immediate vacancy required. The demolition begins next Thursday." The silence that followed, it was surgical. He took the paper, skimmed it once, then again, his eyes darting between paragraphs, his mouth opening like it wanted to argue, but couldn't form the words. She stood now, slowly, her mimosa still half full beside her. "Demolition," she said. That's that's impossible." But it wasn't, because that wasn't their home. It was mine. He never finished the transfer, never filed the final documents, just moved in like he always did, with confidence, not permission, like love entitled him to ownership, like betrayal came with a deed. He assumed I'd be too broken to do anything. That was his mistake. I didn't break. I built. I sold the house to a developer who wanted the land, not the memories. He didn't ask about history, just zoning codes and square footage. Said the view would be perfect for luxury condos. Fine by me. Let the past crumble. I already had. I watched from the car parked across the street, not hiding, just observing. One last time. He stepped outside with the notice still in hand, his face pale, mouth twisted like he was chewing something bitter. He looked around like someone might step in, might explain this away, might make it untrue. Then he saw me, his eyes locked onto mine through the windshield. A second too long, just long enough for the truth to settle. She followed him out, barefoot, holding the edge of her silk robe closed with one hand like she suddenly realized she wasn't dressed for battle. They walked toward me together. I got out of the car. He was the first to speak. "Tell me this is a joke." "No," I said. "It's justice." "You can't." I cut him off. And I did. She looked between us, lost. "But we live here," she said. I nodded. "You lived in my silence. It's expired." His voice dropped to that familiar tone, the one he used to use when he wanted to manipulate me gently. "You didn't have to destroy it." "No," I said, softer this time, "but you shouldn't have built it on stolen ground." He opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. I could see it now, the flicker of panic. The calculations, the way the world tilts when a man realizes he's not holding the cards anymore. And she, God, the confusion on her face. "You told me it was yours," she said to him, her voice cracking. "You said you inherited it." He didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. I turned to go. "You're really going to let them tear it down?" he called out. I paused, then looked back at him, right in the eye. "They didn't tear it down," I said. "You did. The day you made her breakfast in my mother's kitchen, and I left them there, in the driveway, surrounded by everything they thought they'd taken from me. They didn't know it yet, but the demolition had already begun." He knelt in the same spot where he once told me forever. Same fountain behind him, same evening light catching the ivy, but this time, his eyes weren't searching for mine, they were locked on hers. The same ring, a different woman. I saw it all from across the courtyard, too far for them to notice me, too close for me to pretend I hadn't seen, and just like that, my breath disappeared. I don't remember walking. My heels hit the cobblestone like they belonged to someone else. My heartbeat wasn't loud, it was absent, like my body had chosen numbness over collapse. She was gasping, crying, laughing, some dizzy blend of emotions I once knew so well, and he looked up at her like he'd just discovered fire, but I remembered that look because he gave it to me first. 2 years ago, this place was magic. He brought me here at sunset. Said he'd found the perfect spot. Said it felt like it had been waiting for us. I said yes before he even finished asking. That version of me. The one in white heels and soft hopes, spinning toward the future like nothing could break her. I buried her months ago. He just didn't come to the funeral. I could have turned around, could have left before they saw me, but I didn't, because I needed him to see what he did. Not through anger, not through a slap or scream, but through silence, through the stillness of a woman who refuses to beg for what was stolen. He spotted me as I walked past them, the exact moment his hands were still in hers. His eyes widened like he'd seen a ghost. And maybe he had, because I wasn't the same girl he left. I was the version who rebuilt from ash. He opened his mouth like he wanted to explain, to soften, to plead. But nothing came out, just that hollow, soundless space between a lie and its echo. I didn't stop walking, didn't flinch, didn't glance at her. I just walked past them like I didn't taste blood in the back of my throat. Because what do you say to the man who promised you forever and offered your future to someone else? Nothing. You say nothing. You let him live with the image of you walking away. You let him kneel with the weight of your silence on his shoulders. And you never ever look back. Because some rings fit every finger. But not every woman is your once in a lifetime. And he just gave mine away. He left his cologne on my pillow the night he told her he loved her. That was the moment I knew I couldn't just walk away. I had to close it. Not with rage, not with firewood and gasoline, but with something quieter, final, irrevocable. I didn't get revenge. I got freedom. That house, it wasn't just wood and glass. It was a scrapbook of lies, a cage painted with pretty things. Every wall echoed with the way I used to defend him. The way I used to defend us. I stayed longer than I should have. You always do when you're trying to salvage something no one else is fighting for. I folded his shirts even after I knew he was unbuttoning them for someone else. I set 2 plates for dinner long after he stopped coming home hungry. I let the silence sit between us like a third person we both refused to acknowledge. But the truth, I was done long before I left. The day I packed the last box, I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I'd already cried through every drawer, every memory, every damn apology he never gave me. The hardest part wasn't leaving the house. It was realizing it never felt like mine to begin with. It was always his, the colors, the music, the thermostat set to his comfort. I just softened the edges, made it look livable, made him look like a man worth loving. And when he stopped pretending, I finally stopped hoping. That morning, I walked through each room like I was saying goodbye to a version of myself that would never come back. The girl who twisted herself into softer shapes, who lowered her voice, who bit her tongue. She died somewhere between the first affair and the second excuse. I lit a candle in the kitchen, one of the fancy ones I'd been saving for a special night that never came. The scent filled the air, jasmine and smoke. Strange how something can smell like closure. Then I opened the drawer where I kept every letter he wrote me. I read the first one again. It said, "You make everything feel like home." And I burned it in the sink, page by page, memory by memory, lie by lie. I watched the ashes curl into nothing, not out of spite, out of mercy for myself. He didn't deserve to be remembered with rose-colored ink. He deserved silence, and I deserved peace. I left the keys on the counter, right where he used to toss his when he came back smelling like another woman's perfume. He never thought I noticed. I noticed everything. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, just dead. No drama, no slamming, because when you're really done, you don't perform the ending. You just end it. He called that afternoon. 6 missed calls. Stend. 1 voice message that said, "You're being dramatic." I didn't answer, because I wasn't being dramatic. I was being free. Later, I got a message from a mutual friend. He was confused. Said, "Why didn't you tell anyone you were moving?" I didn't owe anyone a broadcast. Not when the breakup already happened in pieces, in sighs, in late-night silences, and empty glances across the dinner table. This wasn't sudden. It was overdue. The last thing I did before I left the driveway, I looked back at the house one final time, not out of longing, but out of acknowledgement, like nodding to the past before turning the page. And you know what I realized? I didn't just leave the house, I burned the chapter. Not so he'd feel it. So I'd stop reading it. Because sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is refuse to carry the weight of someone else's comfort. And I left that house lighter than I'd ever been. The only thing I took with me was my name. And the fire he thought he'd put out.